I've always loved beautiful sights. However, some make you want to weep, like this ice pack, melting away like an ice cube. Here in the Arctic, it just keeps getting smaller. 2 years ago, it lost a surface twice the size of France. At this rate, the Antarctican ice pack could disappear before 2030, or even 2015, according to some scientists. For thousands of years, species have adapted to living beneath as well as on the ice. Their very survival is threatened by the ice's accelerated thawing. And the animal on the front line is the polar bear. When the female gives birth to its babies, it hasn't eaten for months, and now has other mouths to feed. The staple diet are the seals they hunt on the ice. And this ice is now taking longer and longer to materialize. The polar bear's hunting season is therefore becoming ever shorter, and he's fasting longer. On average, the females now weigh 70 kilos less than 30 years ago. And their weakened state makes it hard for them to catch their prey. As a result, their little ones have less to eat. Many bear cubs now no longer make it to adulthood. Over the past few years, the polar bear's population of North Canada has diminished by 1/4, in great part because of climate change. We could ignore the polar bear's plight were it not for the fact that it's a very strong sign that something is definitely awry here on our planet, something that concerns each and every one of us. The Inuits no longer recognize their land.
So last year, we did not get caribou. We harvest caribou in March and again in September. And the caribou didn't come through at all in their migration route because of the weather changes, because of the ice, the way the ice freezes and thaws. Their migration route got changed, so our community was greatly affected in our food security, which is, you know, we depend on the land for food. And when we don't have that food, you know, we don't have food because it has to get flown into our community.
I've seen species of birds coming through southeast Alaska that have never been spotted here before. And in the saltwater environment, we're starting to see semi-tropical fish show up at times.
I see it getting warmer up here. I think we'll have palm trees and bananas pretty soon if we keep going this way.
The future for these people of the North, or at the very least their traditional way of life, seems rather bleak. While the melting of the ice floes on the water doesn't alter the sea level, that isn't the case with the ice thawing upon the land. 99% of this ice is concentrated in Antarctica and Greenland. Scientists thought that this area would only slightly feel the effects of this thaw. They were wrong. In Greenland, the thaw has surpassed even the most pessimistic predictions. The water that flows into the sea has doubled in the past 10 years. At present, the ice melting in Greenland equals a flow rate somewhere between that of the Rhone and the Danube rivers. If only the ice in Greenland was to melt away entirely, the sea level would increase by 7 meters. Fortunately, that hasn't happened yet, but the level of the oceans have already gone up. But there's no need to go so far afield to witness the melting of the glaciers. All of the massifs of France have been affected. Located in the Alps at the foot of the Mont Blanc, the ice sea is one of the tourist attractions of the Chamonix Valley. It withdraws year after year. On average, it loses 5 meters in thickness annually. Since the 1980s, the thawing of the biggest French glacier has been speeding up dangerously. I was shocked to learn that the water from the thaw warms up the inside of the glacier and that the heating phenomenon therefore fuels itself. Along with a native of the Chamonix Valley, high mountain guide Denis Ducrot, I went to see what remained of this giant, who was vanishing before our very eyes.
En permanence, ça bouge. Le glacier, il bouge, le glacier, il avance. Il se modèle avec le glissement, la fonte, l'eau qui passe dessus. Et tout ça, ça paraît complètement immobile.
Look how beautiful it is. Look at the shape of the water current. It's magnificent. It shaped the ice. Denis, you live here and have seen the landscape change.
Oui, c'est vrai que les glaciers, en ce moment, sont dans une période de récession. On voit qu'ils sont beaucoup moins longs, beaucoup moins épais dans la partie finale. Et c'est vrai que la montagne change de physionomie, ça c'est clair.
What's changed?
Bien, par exemple, le glacier des Bossons, où nous allions faire de l'école de glace, parce qu'il était très près du village et il avait une partie plate qui permettait ce genre d'exercice. Maintenant, il est inaccessible parce qu'il est dangereux, il est un petit peu incliné, il est un peu suspendu. J'ai entendu dire qu'il avait reculé de 700 mètres sur les 30-35 dernières années. Voir la montagne, la regarder changer, voir les glaciers qui ne sont plus les mêmes, ça c'est vraiment un indicateur auquel on devrait être particulièrement attentif.
To truly gauge the scope of this phenomenon, we journeyed through the ice sea. 3 kilometers below, the glacier's tongue entirely disappears under a rug of rocks. A sight that violently contrasts with the memories of yesterday. A century ago, the first tourists came here to admire the glacier.
Le glacier était un truc majestueux qui faisait 1,5 km de large et qui était beaucoup plus épais. On voit bien que la glace n'est pas loin là depuis cette arrivée. Et regardez un peu, là on est à peu près dans ce coin-là. Et avant c'était une énorme quantité de glace.
Well, your job has changed a little because of climate change, hasn't it?
Maintenant, enfin, ce qu'on appelle le permafrost qui se dégèle en profondeur, bien sûr quand ça touche des faces qui sont très inclinées, très raides, ça fait des effondrements et l'aiguille des Drues a connu des énormes effondrements. On voit bien la grande trace grise. Avant, là, c'était une voie d'escalade extraordinaire qui s'appelle le pilier Bonatti, du nom du grand alpiniste italien qui l'avait ouvert dans les années 50. Et maintenant, le pilier Bonatti, il n'existe plus. Tout simplement, il y a eu, je crois, quelque chose comme 200 000 mètres cubes de rochers qui sont tombés.
The massif of the Mont Blanc is undergoing major transformations as a result of climate change. Even at 4,300 meters of altitude, high mountain glaciers like the Dôme du Goûter are displaying worrying signs. That's what I understood when I met a team of iceologists from France's CNRS and Grenoble University.
Blanc, rouge.
Ouais.
Et marron, rouge.
Ok.
Tu l'as?
Ouais. Et donne-moi l'autre.
Et puis l'autre, donc celle-là c'est 130 mètres et l'autre, donc la 5 et la 55 mètres.
These researchers are measuring the temperature of the glacier deep down below.
Blanc, jaune, marron, jaune.
Each color corresponds to an in-depth sensor. I'm waiting for it to stabilize. 47,803.
47,803. OK. Et ça correspond à une température de moins 8,4, donc à 55 mètres de profondeur. Entre 1994 et 2005, il y avait déjà un réchauffement de 1 degré vers 55 mètres de profondeur. Et là, on a à nouveau un réchauffement donc de plus 2 degrés depuis 1994. Donc c'est assez important.
And you were expecting this?
On s'attendait à ce qu'il y ait un réchauffement, mais là, il est particulièrement fort. Oui. Et ça peut déstabiliser le glacier s'il se met à glisser sur son socle rocheux. C'est pas pour demain, mais il est nécessaire de suivre l'évolution des températures pour voir comment ça peut évoluer. Et aussi, on a besoin de faire des calculs pour savoir qu'est-ce qui peut se déstabiliser. Je peux répéter que je vais te dire tout à l'heure sur les
glaciers de haute montagne.
The seemingly unchanging high mountain glaciers could eventually become a threat for the populations living down below. Such is the case for the village of Takona, located in the Chamonix Valley.
Ce qui peut arriver, c'est qu'une grande zone du glacier soit déstabilisée et donc un volume de glace qui soit relargué vers l'aval, qui provoque une gigantesque avalanche de sérac. Et puis il y a un autre risque qui est lié aux poches d'eau. Alors là, c'est encore plus sournois parce que ce sont des poches d'eau qui se forment à l'intérieur des glaciers. Et ces poches d'eau, quelquefois, elles sont larguées. Il y a des vidanges brutales. Et ça a été le cas, il y a longtemps, en 1892, sur un petit glacier de Tête-Rousse, qui est dans le massif du Mont-Blanc. Mais ça fait quand même 175 morts à Saint-Gervais. Actuellement, on fait une étude sur le glacier de Tête-Rousse pour voir si ça pourrait recommencer. Ces poches d'eau qui peuvent faire 100, 200 000 mètres cubes, elles peuvent être relarguées d'un seul coup, et là, ça fait la catastrophe.
In Asia, the threat is of another dimension. The glaciers of the Himalayan mountains supply fresh water to 2 billion people, 1/3 of the Earth's population, but for how much longer? If the thaw continues at this rate, 3/4 of these glaciers will no longer exist in 30 years. It's impossible to imagine. Sometimes the waters coming down from the Himalayas saturate the dams. Some rivers, like the Ganges and Brahmaputra, have experienced horrendous floods. All along their riverbeds, India and Bangladesh are prone to repeated floods. During the monsoon season, in summer, this water flowing all the way down to the Gulf of Bengal is capable of carrying everything in its path, villages and humans alike. I journeyed to Bangladesh, one of the countries most affected by climate change. It's a real injustice considering that this country emits less carbon dioxide than the city of New York. 200 rivers run through Bangladesh, including the incredibly strong Brahmaputra. Fueled by the accelerated melting of the Himalayan glaciers, its powerful rate of flow erodes the banks of its beds, as well as the coast of the islands that dot it. Yves Mar, a former Air France steward who's been living in the north of the country, has seen for himself the increase of erosions and flooding. In the 15 years you've been navigating through the region, you've noticed a change in the climate?
Personnellement, j'ai vécu une grande inondation en 1997, terrible, l'inondation du siècle. En 1998, une grande inondation. En 2004, très grave inondation. 2006, grave inondation. 2007, 2 inondations coup sur coup, plus le cyclone. Et donc là, les gens ne savent plus à quel sens se vouer.
There you can really tell that the island is falling in the river.
Alors, les îles sont érodées par le fleuve. Et c'est typique de ce qui se passe en permanence ici sur les îles du Brahmaputra. Imaginez là, la côte est ici. L'année prochaine, elle sera 1 kilomètre plus à l'intérieur. Le champ va partir, la maison va partir, les arbres partent et eux vont se déplacer. Et ce sont, en quelque sorte, ce sont des réfugiés du fleuve.
Bangladesh is crumbling. Here they call it Mati Panga, the earth falling away. Entire pieces of the country are disappearing. Like in Kawabata, one of the thousands of river islands which are being eroded. Kawabata, 300 inhabitants. Here, people survive by fishing and farming, mainly rice. Its inhabitants are fully aware that they're in limbo. The villages are more than likely doomed, as the local elder explained to me. Sir, you've seen the climate change, and this has caused a lot of problems for you.
আমি এই দেশে জন্ম হয়েছি কিংবা আমার বয়স 70 বছর হ্যাঁ আগে এই বয়সের নিম্ন 50 বার বাড়ি ভাঙছি এই জায়গা ভেঙে গেলে ফির আবার পুনরায় অন্য জায়গায় সরে যেতে হবে এখানে কি থাকা চলবে না তো এই চৈত মাসে সারা লাগে নাকি তার ঠিক নেই নদীর যা পরিস্থিতি
Are you worried for the future?
আগের মতন মনে করেন যে এখন আর নাই আগের যেভাবে চলছি সেভাবে চলাও জানে সেভাবে দুনিয়াও চলে না আকাশেরও পানি নাই অনেক পার্থক্য অনেক আগের চা পরিবর্তন চলছে দুর্ভিক্ষিত আগে মনে করেন যে খুব আল্লাহ ভালো চলাইছে জমা জমি বহুত ছিল ভেঙে ছিঁড়ে গেছে এখন জমা জমিও নাই জায়গা জমিও নাই এখন মানুষের দুর্ভিক্ষ আর ফুরাইতেছে না
An island doomed to vanish like thousands of others if nothing is done, affecting some 4 million farmers. So what's the solution for the 4 million people living off these islands?
C'est une question énorme. Alors, ce que l'on fait pour le moment, on part au plus pressé. Quand les maisons partent, eh bien, on arrive tout de suite, on les reconstruit.
Well, that's a small solution. What's the general solution?
Alors, la solution générale, eh bien, écoutez, si on arrivait à creuser le Brahmapoutre, si on arrivait à draguer la rivière, eh bien, déjà, elle déborderait moins.
How do you drag a river that's 30 kilometers wide?
Alors voilà, il faut des moyens énormes. Et si ce pays était en Europe, je pense qu'on aurait trouvé la solution parce qu'on aurait trouvé les moyens. Mais ici, bon, la communauté mondiale devrait peut-être mettre la main à la poche. Ici, on paye la taxe carbone en nature pour le monde entier.
To relieve the suffering of the river's forgotten victims, Yanmar set up an association financing a hospital boat. He offers free services to thousands of Bangladeshis every month, and there's always a crowd. The closest public dispensary is 4 hours via boat from here. So this boat is your life's dream.
Oui, c'est une péniche française que j'ai récupérée et je l'ai amenée ici à travers toutes les mers. Et il m'a fallu 3 mois et demi pour arriver jusque-là. Et on a décidé de venir ici, au nord du Bangladesh, parce que c'est l'endroit où les gens sont le plus pauvres pratiquement du monde. C'est les pauvres des pauvres, c'est les gens qui sont complètement ignorés. Et ils n'avaient jamais vu de médecin, bien sûr. Et depuis que nous sommes là, on a vu pratiquement 1 million de personnes. Mais ça,
1 million?
Ce bateau, pour eux, ça fait des miracles tous les jours.
More than a miracle, it's a tour de force, born out of lots of love. Volunteer doctors relay each other to offer everything from dental care to the treatment of small injuries and cataract operations. But the need is too great. And when land becomes scarce, there's no other choice than to leave. The result is a massive exodus towards the capital. 1,000 farmers arrive here every day. We're now in Dhaka, the Bangladeshi capital. Officially, it's inhabited by 10 million people, but the real number is probably closer to 4 or 5 million more. In addition to the traditional exodus from the countryside, there's now the influx of climate refugees, packed in the slums. They're everywhere, even along the railway line. Dhaka is the world's biggest shanty town. Here, refugees from the north fleeing the rivers join the refugees from the south, those from the coast, who've been driven from their land by the rising water and the even more devastating hurricanes. In November 2007, Cyclone Sidr killed 3,700 and left 500,000 homeless. Most were from the entirely destroyed island of Bola. Many survivors have found shelter in this slum.
And our house was completely washed away.
Why did you come to Dhaka?
জিনা বাঙাল পর থাকতে পাই না তাও মনে করেন অন্যজনের জায়গায় থাকলে অন্যজনের তো কয়দিন মনে করেন বছর দিকে থাকতে দেয় তারপর মানুষের জায়গায় মানুষ থাকতে দিব না মানুষ একজনের জায়গায় অন্য একদিন কতদিন থাকতে দেয় তারপর মনে করেন কয়েকদিন থাকার পরে তারপর আমরা ঢাকায় পড়ছি তার জায়গা সে লিয়ে গেছে আমরা আয়া পড়ছি কষ্ট লাগছে না আমগো দেশ ছেড়ে আইতে ঢাকা শহরে তো অন্য দেশ আমগো দেশ থেকে আমরা অন্য দেশে এলাম কষ্ট আছে না
When they could sell their labor, they earn €1.50 per day. But that's not every day. So they feed themselves as they can. The poorest among them buy chicken skins without the meat. But sometimes, even that is a luxury.
খাই অনেক কষ্ট করিয়া এই গরিব মানুষ তারা যা মিলাই তাই খাই কোনোদিন মাছ খাই কোনোদিন তরকারি খাই যে আজকে নিরামিষ তরকারি জানছি ওখানে এরকমই খাইতাম দিন কাটাতাম আসছি যিনি আনতালে খাই না আনতালে না খাই বাচ্চাগুলো অনেক কষ্ট করতাম আসছি বাচ্চা দুধের বাচ্চা থুয়া ধরেন কাজ করি মানুষের বাসা ভাড়া কাজ করি টাকা দেয় তো খাই ওই মাছগুলো দেয় খাই না দিলে তো ওই বাসায় খাই যে স্যার এই
The greatest irony is that one of the only small regular jobs available for climate refugees, that is constructing dams to protect Dhaka and their slum from the water, which is rising slowly yet relentlessly.
ডানার পিছনে 5 বার ঘুরাবো 1 2 3
With backing from UNICEF, a Bangladeshi ONG has started a program teaching children how to swim. As incredible as it might seem, they're not usually taught this skill here, the country of the crazy floods. Drowning is one of the first causes of infant mortality in the country after malnutrition.
We lost more than 17,000 kids every year in Bangladesh, and which is 46 kids in every day. And weather is changing in Bangladesh, and for that why water is rising and flood is coming every year, which is one of the main cause of child death in Bangladesh.
The association has already trained 35,000 children, and the NGO is now considering extending this program to adults. But it's a tiny band-aid, a well-meaning yet trifling effort in the face of the enormous threat which is looming. Nearly half of the land in Bangladesh is at less than 1 meter above sea level. If the waters were to rise by 40 centimeters before 2050, a hypothesis deemed entirely possible by experts, then 20% of the country would be underwater. And there would then be 20 million more climate refugees. Where will they go? What future is there for the men and women of this ever-shrinking country? Time is running out for Bangladesh. Since they share the same language as on the other side of the border, many Bangladeshis want to immigrate to India. But the largest democracy in the world is proving less than welcoming. It recently built a demarcation line that is ever more hermetic. And there's a curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. No one's allowed to come near. The Indian border guards can shoot on all those trying to pass through. Officially, these security measures are to fend off infiltrations by Islamic terrorists. But they're also against refugees forced to flee because of rising water levels. There are several dozen deaths every year, and mistakes are legion. Farmers at the border are often the victims of blunders. Yet to be fair, it must be said that India is having to grapple with equally serious problems linked to climate change. Water levels are also rising on the Indian coastline. In the Ganges Delta, the archipelago of Sunderbans encompassed around 100 islands. But some have now disappeared. Sheikh Lal Mohan was one of the 10,000 inhabitants of the island of Lohachara. Back in 2006, it was the first island in the world ever to be swallowed up by the sea.
এইখানে তো মানে আমাদের চর মানে লোহাচড়া ছিল তার এর মাঝস্থলে আমাদের জায়গা ছিল তারপরে ঘর বাড়ি ছিল তারপরে চাষের জমি টমি এরা ছিল আর কি এইখানটা আর ঘর এই জলের ভিতরে সব নদীগ্রস্ত হয়ে গেছে তো সব জলে সব ডুবে গেছে সব এরকম ভাঙিয়ে সব ডুবে গেছে জলে হ্যাঁ এখানে জন্মস্থান হয়েছিল আমাদের জন্মস্থান হওয়ার পর আমাদের যখন জায়গা জমি ভেঙে গেল নিশ্চয়ই একটা আমাদের মনের মধ্যে একটা দুঃখ হলো আমরা লাস্টে ছিলাম লাস্টে যখন না থাকার জায়গা ছিল না তখনই আমরা ট্রলারে করে এখানে সাগরে চলে গেছি
Lal Mohan and his family, like most of the inhabitants of Lohachara, found shelter on the biggest island of the archipelago, Sagar. This is the first officially censused climate refugee camp in the world. 1,200 families live here. The local government gave them a house and a plot of land. Nothing like what they had before. But they had no choice. And unfortunately, there'll be more and more climatic refugees in the Sunderbans. In 10 years' time, 60,000 people will have to leave their land because of rising water levels. A fact confirmed in Calcutta, 3 hours by car north of the Sunderbans. The Bengalese capital also provides shelter for climate refugees. One of these neighborhoods has been renamed Little Sunderban. At the Oceanographic Department of his university, Professor Hazra undertook the first study of the impact of climate change on the islands of the Delta. By comparing the maps of the archipelago with satellite pictures, he was able to measure the erosion of the land by the rising sea levels.
So I could see that when I checked the satellite image of 1996, you can see that the same place, south of Goramara, there's no island at all. I mean, what has happened actually? I thought that, has it vanished, or has been submerged in the high tide, or it has been eroded, or there is some error?
You can see the change. Huh?
There are changes, and we can map like this that, well, all the southern islands, these two islands, the Lohachara, Bedford, is vanished from the map, whereas Goramara is vanishing very fast, eroding very fast, being submerged. The southern part of Shagor Island has also vanished. This Jambudip has vanishing. In 30 years, the island system has lost 86 square kilometers in spite of some deposition or accretion here and there.
Goramara will probably be the next island to disappear. In less than 15 years, half of the island will be gnawed by the sea. At the island's post office, a real institution established in 1940 and still sporting a letterbox from the British colonial era, the postman keeps seeing his round changed around and piles of undistributed post grow. He doesn't know which doors to knock on anymore.
बहुत चिट्ठी आती है जो यहाँ से चला जाता है तो उसका तो यहाँ तो रहता नहीं है तो उसका तो पता तो नहीं लगता तब हमको जो है इन्वेस्टिगेट करना पड़ता है कि वो कहाँ चला गया है उसके बाद उसका एड्रेस मिल जब जाता है तब वहाँ जो है हम चिट्ठी भेज देते हैं पहले से काम तो कम हो रहा है क्योंकि आइलैंड छोटा हो गया और लोग तो यहाँ से चले जा रहे हैं
The few dams built around the coast are overflowed by the slightest sea storm. Farmers have done their best to protect their crops. But it's a lost battle. Many must abandon their land.
এসব নোনা জল ভর্তি হয়ে সব নোনা জলে এই সব নোনা জলে ভর্তি হয়ে গেছে কোনো কাজও হচ্ছে না নোনা জল বাঁধ ভেঙে নোনা জল ঢুকে গেছে তারপরে এই যে ক্ষেত নষ্ট ধান নষ্ট পুকুর ঘর বাড়ি নষ্ট হয়ে গেছে এবং গালটা কাটলেও নোনা জল বার হয় এইরকম সব নোনা জলে ক্ষতি হয়েছে মাছ শাক সব ক্ষতি ধান টান
You must be very optimistic or naive to plan your future in Goramara. These children will almost certainly have to leave their island. But their teacher still has hope. His class on climate change explains to the bemused students what they must do if they want to continue living in the Gulf of Bengal.
খাদ্যের জন্য আমরা মৃত্যুমুখে পতিত হব দ্বীপটা ধ্বংস হয়ে যাবে এবারে এই দ্বীপটাকে রক্ষা করতে গেলে আমাদের কি করতে হবে গাছ লাগাতে হবে প্রচুর পরিমাণে গাছ লাগাতে হবে যদি গাছ না লাগাই তাহলে আমাদের কি হবে ভূমিক্ষয় হবে ভূমিক্ষয় কি কেন হয় না উদ্ভিদ তার শিকড়ের দ্বারা মাটিকে আঁকড়ে ধরে রাখতে পারে যদি মাটি উন্মুক্ত হয়ে থাকে যদি বেরান অবস্থায় থাকে তাহলে ক্ষয়টা বেশি হবে চারদিকে সমুদ্র আছে সমুদ্রের প্রচন্ড ঢেউ আমাদের এই পাহাড়কে ভেঙে দিচ্ছে আস্তে আস্তে করে দ্বীপটা ক্ষয়ে যাচ্ছে তো হচ্ছে আমরা গাড়ি ঘোড়া ব্যবহার করছি সেই
The new slogan in the Sunderbans is one tree, one life. An NGO is planting mangroves to fight erosion. 22 million plants have already been planted on 12,000 hectares. A real race against the clock to stabilize the ground. But at the water level's current rate of increase, this at best leaves just a few years' respite. There's really no solution to save the Sunderbans. But global warming isn't just affecting the Gulf of Bengal. In the country's capital, New Delhi, I went to TERI, a research institute on energy and natural resources. Its director is an eminent scientist, repeatedly rewarded for his work as well as his cricket skills. The current president of the GIEC, a group bringing together thousands of climate experts from 130 nations, Dr. Pachauri has received on its behalf the Nobel Peace Prize for its work on global warming, a phenomenon affecting the Indian subcontinent as well as the rest of the world. What are the most important consequences of climate change that you can see here in India?
Well, we have a range of impacts on India. I mean, the melting of the Himalayan snows, the rising sea levels. India has a long coastline. We have problems of impacts on agriculture and changes in the patterns of the monsoons. You know, there are hundreds of millions of farmers in this country, perhaps about 400 million farmers, who are dependent entirely on rainfall. So with changes in the rainfall patterns, their lives are going to be shattered.
What would you say to the people watching you on television to convince them that the climate is changing right now and it's mainly as a result of our way of living?
I think if the people realize that in Africa, in parts of Asia, there are people who are going to become climate refugees. These are human beings. They are not just numbers. They are living under very difficult conditions, and they have done nothing to bring about this problem of climate change. They have hardly used any energy, any fossil fuels. So therefore, I think there is firstly the ethical dimension. French people must understand that there is a set of ethics involved over here. They must understand that if there is going to be chaos in the developing countries, in the poorest regions of the world, then it is going to affect everyone, including France. So let's work together and let's find solutions. And let's do it with a sense of urgency because we have very little time.
I get the impression that it's not an emergency, yet you're saying that we must change in the next 7 years. 7 years is very brief.
Yes, it is certainly a matter of enormous urgency. We have to invest in public transport. We have to redesign our cities. We have to redesign our buildings. Our buildings are energy guzzlers. shopping malls that we have, we are copying them from the United States. It's stupid. And we have to change this. And we have to change our way of living. I mean, I've been telling everybody, and this is not very popular, eat less meat. You've got to start with yourself. The world is eating too much meat. The average consumption of meat over the whole population of this world is 43 kilograms per year. That's too much. And the entire meat cycle is very intensive in the emissions of greenhouse gases. So I keep telling people, eat less meat, you will be healthier, and so would the planet. One day a week without meat. And I think it's little things like this. If we bring about change, we realize how important it is for us to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Well, you're also pro-boycotting companies who aren't making any efforts at all.
I believe that. You know, I think these solutions to a problem like climate change cannot come from nation states. It has to come from the grassroots level. It has to come from the people. And I think if it comes from the people, then our leaders will also hear their voice. I believe that for something as important as climate change, you have to have a grassroots movement. And yes, if there are companies who are doing the wrong things, they should be boycotted. I think their products should not be purchased by anybody in the market. And I hope people are able to do that.
Dr. Pashuri's message is aimed at us all. We must stop thinking we'll escape the phenomenon that is already affecting far-flung lands. Everything is linked. We're all in the same boat. What French person is unaware that the shoreline of the Camargue is experiencing the fastest erosion rate in the world, and that France is struck by a growing number of gusts of wind and tornadoes? The Great Storm of 1999 has not been forgotten. With climate change, cyclones, hurricanes, and typhoons are multiplying throughout all the continents, becoming ever more violent and deadly in the process.
I thought I was immune for that because I'm a meteorologist, but in the last couple of years, I've really seen thunderstorms like they never appeared, at least not in the last 30 or 40 years. And I've seen damage. I've seen roofs taken off the houses. I've seen flooding, flash flooding that was so quick that people could not even save their lives. So I think that impressed me the most, because sometimes when you talk about climate change or do calculations on the paper, it looks scary, but in real life, you just feel it is so real, it is so here, and we have to do something about it.
那这一次的莫拉克台风，严重到就是，可以说在2秒钟的时间，就毁灭了我们整个部落，也走了20几个人的20几条人命，对。
哦，这无同的现象就是讲，咱去时啊咧看安尼雨安尼吼，拢袂停，落雨拢落袂停，啊一直落，无一个空间讲休困一个时间拢无，就一直落。这3天的时间就是一直落，自透早落到暗时，暗时落到透早安尼。哦，这个现象是较早风台所无的现象，因为较早的风台是安那，是伊来的时阵可能是1天，啊是1天外。 啊，这粒唔是，这粒未来甲结束拄啊足拖4、5天，所以讲伊的雨量足恐怖，安尼。
In August 2009, Taiwan was struck by the worst typhoon in its history. More than 600 people died, and thousands of others were left homeless. These shocking pictures of a natural disaster made headline news. Unfortunately, because they now occur so often, we're starting to become jaded. But the foremost victims of climate change, the most numerous, aren't those we might think. All is calm in the countryside of North Mali. Too calm. Nowadays, there's little cattle in the pasture. There really is no pasture. Everything is scorched, desert-like. The rain hasn't come out for months. And the nomads haven't found their usual watering holes. Everything is dry. Today, the rain has filled up the ponds, but it's too late. The weather pattern has been unsettled for the past 2 months, which is fatal in this extreme climate. 3 shepherds from this tribe died of thirst this summer. Al-Karim gathers the last remnants of his flock.
لبانا جنة جروان غيبانا جنة وجيجين هلا عندي هادنا راكبنا هلا ندخل لسن نركب أفلي جادي ودنتي صار دغاء الوقت جري يجشان تجيضم تار الزيجاري تامت تار الزيج إن غيلا تنغي تجيضم تنيبانا شكشو
Al-Karim had never experienced so many deaths. Luckily, he still had a female camel. Her milk feeds the family. Along with the goat's milk, it forms the base of their diet. He, his wife, and his 5 children only eat 1 meal per day. As a result of global warming, the famine, which had virtually disappeared in Africa, has returned. Malnutrition is growing rampant among the nomads, a population usually not affected by food shortages. This woman, Aramat, has lost almost everything. She's walked nearly a day to bring her baby to this center in North Gao, opened by Action contre la faim. The French NGO has launched an emergency program to detect undernourished children. And that day, it was swamped with people. Everyone was waiting, worried, for hours on end. Finally, it's Aramat's turn. She's being looked after by the program coordinator. Just by glancing at the child, he knows this is an emergency. A fact confirmed by its measurements. 4 kilograms to at 7 months. The weight of a healthy newborn for nearly the same size. 58 centimeters. The little one is at an advanced stage of malnutrition.
La conséquence de la malnutrition, il y a plusieurs conséquences. Il y a un retard psychomoteur, il y a un retard intellectuel. Ça peut aller si l'enfant consomme ses propres aliments lui-même de son corps, il ira jusqu'à mourir. S'il n'y a pas une prise en charge adéquate de l'enfant et qui est toujours dans la même situation, ça traîne vers la mort.
In order to save the little girl, she must be fed a hypercalorific substance made with peanut butter. According to the NGO, nearly half of the nomad children in this region of Mali are suffering from chronic malnutrition. The mother, who's also underweight, will be given a bag of cereal that should last her 2 weeks. She'll then have to return, if her camp isn't too far away. Unfortunately, Aramat's family has decided to leave and search for fresh pastures and watering holes, which are becoming ever more scarce. Over the past 30 years, this part of the Sahel has completely changed. There was a gigantic pond here in the 1970s. And over there, a forest as far as the eye could see with big cats and giraffes. And in the past, there wasn't a single grain of sand in this village. The old men of the camp know that everything went wrong. In the heart of all their discussions, of all their worries, the same obsession: the lack of water.
الناس أنا سد بخمتنا خاصة لبست في اللي جاي غاسنكم كلا ورثنا ربطة ودوكين هي أجود عندك الناس ولا شكاس أجود عندك الناس تفوق تعرق الناس ولا شكاس أجود عندك تكناد يهز وعندك الناس تطرقي إجماع الشكاس جاء أجا عندك خرجودي أجا عندك تكناد تكاس في الدين خرجودي الناس على تينا النقطة ما سهام شيء سوى ما رجعت من زوجتنا جيف تاجري الناس انتني الدار دوجة نتام يا يكبوا وغنا قرب الناس ركاب النقطة هلتين عندك الناس سهام شيء الناس صرت تهيفوا.
Here they may be facing the end of an age-old way of life. And what the nomads feel in the pit of their stomachs, scientists have confirmed. Yes, there is a climate change. It's raining half as much as before in the north. And in the more humid south, the rainy season is briefer. The rainfall is more intense and sparse, often ruining the farmers' efforts. I saw this firsthand when I visited the cotton fields, a 4-hour ride south of Bamako. Why are they singing?
Elle travaille en masse pour s'entraider et là quand elle travaille, elle chante.
It's magnificent because the noise of the pickaxe really echoes the sound. Altogether, it's really magnificent. They all look very happy when in reality they've experienced a very difficult year.
Sambe damine ameso kala nkola korite la jona bon ni sana na tura nyoka abe fere minke o fere bebe buru geleya banka ka sababu ke wati yelman kola korni ni geleya sora alla nkola bon na toro o geleya ma sinekala tena abolo sora duko kola bebe.
These last few years, with a month and a half of rain instead of 3, the harvest was bad, yielding less than half than usual. Another bane for Mali, where 1 out of 4 people rely on cotton for their livelihood. The authorities have therefore decided to launch an ambitious plan to adapt to climate change. First, by tailoring the weather bulletins to the farmers' need. Every morning at 7 a.m., everyone tunes in to their radio.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Bienvenue à ce bulletin d'information. Présentation Siratiki Traoré. Des pluies intermittentes, parfois orageuses, sont attendues à Bamako.
This is gospel for the farmers. When should they sow? When should they harvest? All the answers are here.
conseils et avis, comme vous le savez, les premiers semis sont en âge de récolte. Il est demandé aux agriculteurs de la localité concernée de faire attention à la prévision du temps pour faire les récoltes. Les paysans dans le temps, pour comprendre un peu la campagne hivernale, se référaient soit au cri des oiseaux ou à la floraison de certains arbres. Aujourd'hui, avec les longues sécheresses des années 70, le paysan a perdu ses repères. Aujourd'hui, le paysan, son seul repère, c'est ses conseils et avis. Les conseils et avis météo sont consommés comme on consomme le pain dans les grandes villes.
Women even listen to the bulletins before doing the washing to know how best to use the rainwater. In return, the farmers are asked to help the weather forecast. In every village, there's now a rain gauge and an eyewitness farmer who calls in every morning to indicate how much rain has fallen.
Oui, allô? C'est le météo, oui, c'est le météo. 45 mm de pluie. Elle tombe à Dieu fin.
It's become a ritual for thousands of farmers. They've come together throughout the country, all the way to under the talking tree. Even the griot, the village's traditional storytellers who transmit family stories from generation to generation, have been asked to help spread the good word.
Et na ma dora be no fana na mo fana famu aw be se météo mo ou be passer à radio la météo mo be passer télévision aw be météo fana la me bon mo na be to kan ladilika na me na be to kan kuma ni fɛn nunu na me ibaye o tigi de betanye atigi ga soro be bonye amana ke sele tuwa ye quand nous on veut les expliquer quelque chose justement c'est des exemples terre à terre qu'on a vécu dans le village. On dit, mais vous savez, ici, là, derrière nous, on venait tout petit, on venait nous baigner dans ce marigot. Ah oui, c'est vrai. Mais on dit, mais où se trouve? Ah, mais c'est vrai, le marigot, il a disparu. Hein. Donc, vous voyez, donc, il y a le changement climatique, donc le monde même change. Donc, par rapport à ça, il faudrait que vous aussi, vous changez.
Rather than complaining, the Malians are taking action. It's a matter of survival. 80% of the population relies on agriculture to live, and their diet is based on one cereal, sorghum. As a result of the climatic unrest and erratic rainfall, crops have faltered, threatening food security. So they're searching for solutions. All day long, this boy chases off birds with rocks to protect the fields of the research institute. Scientists want to cross the best seedlings in order to produce a sorgho that will withstand Mali's new climatic conditions. A hybrid able to grow faster and yield more cereals, so that the harvest can be tripled or quadrupled. The research is based on the knowledge of Malian farmers who, for centuries, have kept the best seedlings. To tackle this emergency, the scientists are crossing their most interesting varieties. And the farmers are taking part in the research. Regularly, they're asked to vote not for a man, but for one of these new varieties of sorghum.
Al ni bi kungolo korota ibi kungolo korota ka nyola jede parce que itete ka vota ni ima alaje ko.
There are 36 varieties before them.
Dans chaque enveloppe, on a 3 bulletins, le blanc qui signifie très bon, le rouge qui signifie très mauvais et le jaune ça c'est moyen. Donc en fonction de leur appréciation, de l'appréciation qu'ils font de la variété.
Nothing escapes the farmer's eagle eye as they make their choice.
Voilà. Bon, et blanc blanc nous connaissons ça. Bon, va ira ko ni nyoma. Bon, et munde yala ni o e defo e re haklina la.
On est ne mi yala ça. Akasma wa.
Akasma ko jugo. OK. Donc e bitaka.
Unadapted to the climate, this variety won't be chosen. The elected seedlings will be distributed for free. In Mali's Bambara tradition, to make it rain, you call on the village witch doctor to sacrifice a black hen. But today, the Malian authorities have decided to go high-tech by bringing in rain-making planes from the United States. There are 2 of them at Bamako Airport. On their wings, they've put flares made from chemical products, like calcium chloride. Dropping them in the clouds is the daring mission entrusted to Christopher the pilot. Was it true we're going to fly into these storms, these big cumulonimbuses that you're usually forbidden from flying into?
It actually is. But for this process, for what we are doing, we have to enter the storm. We have to enter the cloud in order to release the agent that we are working.
It's not too rough?
It is rough. It's very turbulent.
I'm a little bit afraid, tell you frankly. Okay, let's go.
Okay.
So we're off to the famous cumulonimbus at 7,000 meters of altitude. So this is supposed to bring about rain? We'll see. I'm still a little skeptical. Christopher's first job is to find the clouds. But not just any cloud, storm clouds. He's in constant contact with the radar service on the ground. Using satellite maps, they guide him towards the most interesting clouds for the agricultural zones.
2 flares burning.
Once he's correctly placed, the pilot lights the flares. A nice crystal-like substance then escapes into the cloud. Steam concentrates around it. The water drops condense, and the rain falls. This technology has helped boost Mali's rainfall by an average of 15%, and even by up to 40% in some regions.
So you're like God? No, I'm not really like God. I'm only more like a scientist helping God to provide more suitable rain.
So you need cloud anyway?
We need clouds, and we need moisture. We need water in order to help the process.
So you still need God?
Yes, we definitely still need God every day.
The pilot knows what he's talking about, as the plane sometimes must fly to 10,000 meters to drop its silver iodide on top of the clouds, a place where no other planes go. Hey, he's not going to go in there. It's impossible. Only a few pilots dare navigate in the wind currents of these terrifying clouds. But he's crazy. Can you hear the hail falling on the plane? You hear the hail falling?
Because a thunderstorm can swallow you, chew you up, and spit you out if you do not act properly. So you must respect the thunderstorm. You must respect Mother Nature.
It's going to rain. It's good for the Malians. It's good for the Malians. We're doing something good. Look at the light. Look at how subtle the light is. It's amazing. Look how beautiful it is. Doubts and criticism have been expressed about the toxicity of these products for the land. However, the government believes in the efficiency of its rain project. It's proudly showcased at the end of every weather forecast.
Hier, les opérations de pluie provoquées ont été menées dans la région de Koulikoro et Sikasso, où les conditions étaient favorables. Voici les hauteurs de pluie recueillies. Région de Koulikoro, cercle de Kati, il a été recueilli 4 mm de pluie à Tetukoro. Cercle de Dioila, il a été recueilli 33 mm de pluie à Dioeguna.
I met with the president of Mali, Amadou Toumani Touré, one of Africa's most brilliant leaders. He could be bitter about global warming as a Malian emits 100 times less greenhouse gases than an American. But he doesn't want to be perceived as a victim. Like his people, he encourages us to draw up our sleeves and cooperate. Mr. President, does Mali see itself as the victim of rich, industrialized nations?
Non. Je pourrais dire certainement que les responsabilités ne sont pas au même niveau. Certainement que les pays industriels sont beaucoup plus responsables. Mais il y a nous aussi. Nous avons des comportements parfois négatifs sur notre propre environnement. Celui qui coupe un arbre de 50 ans pour en faire un tam-tam, celui qui met du feu pour faire des brûlés et qui brûle pratiquement toute une forêt. Donc l'homme également est devenu un élément d'agression. Donc chez nous aussi, il y a des changements de comportement et d'habitude. Parce que les gens ont pensé que les ressources naturelles et les ressources de l'environnement sont inépuisables. Ce qui est systématiquement faux.
There are people who say that rich nations should pay an enormous sum. I've heard nearly $100 billion to developing African nations suffering from global warming.
Je ne suis pas systématiquement d'accord de la manière, mais je suis d'accord pour le fait que nous devons être aidés et soutenus.
So you don't want a check?
Je veux des chèques, mais il y a la manière de donner qui compte. On dit chez nous que la main qui donne est toujours au-dessus de celle qui reçoit. Il y a une large philosophie en la question. J'ai besoin de ce chèque. J'ai besoin de désensabler le fleuve Niger. J'ai besoin de reboiser mes forêts. J'ai besoin également de corriger pas mal, d'avoir de l'eau pour mes populations. Donc j'ai besoin également de pâturage pour mes bétails. Donc lorsqu'on voit toute cette somme, j'ai besoin de l'eau pour pouvoir pêcher mes poissons, qui est un élément vital de ma propre survie et qui est l'axe important du développement de mon pays. Mais seulement je ne n'irai pas agresser. Non, nous pensons que c'est un débat universel que nous devons faire sans agression, et les réponses que nous devons dire, ce n'est pas « voilà mon chèque, paye-moi », mais c'est de dire « voilà les dégâts qui se passent chez nous, c'est vous qui l'avez fait, nous aussi en partie, comment envisagez-vous de nous soutenir et nous aider pour qu'on puisse trouver réparation ?» L'aide au développement existe, il y a beaucoup de pays qui contribuent. Pourquoi ne pas faire une aide à l'écologie? Non seulement ça nous permet de résoudre nos propres problèmes, mais ça nous permet également de résoudre un peu les problèmes du monde.
Do you still have hope?
Et raison pour laquelle moi j'ai espoir au-delà de tout. Parce qu'aujourd'hui le monde est conscient de ce qui arrive. Et chacun sait que partout qu'il soit, en Asie, en Océanie, en Europe, en Afrique et ailleurs, que la dégradation nous touche chacun. Personne ne peut être à l'abri. Ni des barbelés, ni un mur ne peut protéger personne. Donc étant donné que tout le monde est conscient des difficultés, c'est sûr que c'est le début d'une solution.
The president of Mali is a humanist. He believes in man. He believes that we can right our wrongs. That light will overcome the darkness. Perhaps he's right. Today, no country can afford to be cynical about climate change. Take the case of Australia, the world's top coal exporter, sitting on massive reserves. For years, Australia refused to ratify the Kyoto Protocol, aimed at limiting greenhouse gas emissions. 85% of its electricity comes from coal plants, the most polluting. Per inhabitant, Australians are the first carbon dioxide emitters on the planet, in front of the Americans. But things are changing. Because Australia, long smug about being removed from the rest of the world's misery, is now feeling the full brunt of climate change in its southern region. In the countryside, there are auctions that should not be missed. For some, it's an opportunity to make a good deal. But for many of these hardy farmers, it's a way of saying goodbye to one of their own. Today, Colin Zanker is selling his farm, the one he inherited from his dad. He's selling his land, sheep, machines, and furniture. Everything must disappear before the end of the day, all because of a seemingly endless 8-year drought.
I've lived on this farm apart for a couple of years all my life. It is hard from that point of view, but when things are fairly tough and the lifestyle is being lost because of the debt burdens and not being able to financially make a living anymore, yeah, the decision becomes quite easy. I'm only in my early 40s, so I've still got plenty of time to go on and get another job and do other things.
Since the beginning of the Great Drought, Australia has lost 90,000 agricultural jobs. Like Colin, many are attempting to find new jobs. And then there are the ones who simply can't bear to go on.
One of the worst effects of the climate and the irrigation problems in this area is we have suicides. People get to the stage, and Australian men live on that idea that they're the Anzacs and they were born to support their wives and their families. We've lost quite a few people. We're losing a person in the Murray-Darling Basin. They take once a week, only on today's radio, they believe the suicide rate within the Murray-Darling Basin is 40 to 50% higher than it had been predicted. I have lost friends who I know have, we call it topped themselves, have killed themselves because I don't know whether they can't go on or whether they're ashamed they can't do what they were taught to do and support their families properly. It's a bloody disaster.
Australia is currently prey to the worst drought of the past 100 years. A plague that has lasted 8 years and which has struck the entire south of the country. Little by little, it transforms fields into dusty plains, ravages forests, dries up riverbeds. It has even affected the legendary Murray River, the biggest river in the country. A genuine lifeline unfurling over 3,700 kilometers. Some of its affluents are now dry. The Murray, the victim of both the drought and the cupidity of men. Every year they take 90% of its water, mainly to irrigate without any regard for the consequences. Such behavior during the worst drought of the century is shocking. How long will this continue? Because the Murray is on the brink of becoming obsolete, its flow virtually reduced to a trickle. In the past 5 years, not a single drop of the Murray has reached its mouth. The water you see here isn't that of the river, but the Indian Ocean. Nothing arrives to the sea. Just upstream from the river's mouth, there are 2 massive stretches of fresh water, fed by the Murray. The Alexandrina and Albert Lakes, 2 natural gems famed for their wildlife. Today, you have to use a hovercraft to get around these lakes. And that's because the fresh water is running out, as we can see here, in the middle of the lake.
I've been through here when the water was about this deep, 1.5 meters. All this area through here was just a backwater lagoon of wildlife and bird life. What we're looking at here is the southern equivalent of the Ural Sea. The turtles are suffering from acid and changing environment in the area surrounding the lakes.
The falling water level has had incredible results.
Yeah, and this particular channel that we're looking at is highly acidified. The water is gone. The air has got to it and has actually turned the acid sulfate soils below into close to what is sulfuric acid, and it's pyrite rich, of course, and that's hence the very dark red-brown colour that we're looking at here now. That has been tested in the past down here at levels as low as pH 1.5, and in fact, to give you an idea of what that level is, that's about the same as what you have in your motorcar battery. So it's pretty dangerous stuff.
Red rivers brimming with acid are becoming a common sight in Australia. The drought having initiated the same chemical reaction throughout the country. A phenomenon which has reached its climax in the Bottle Bend River. An acrid smell, an oppressive silence. The ecological apocalypse in living color. It's enough to make any nature lover feel sick. Gary is a professional fisherman. The sea has been his family's livelihood for 3 generations. He's been taught to respect nature's resources and is mad as hell. Australia is facing such a disastrous situation because of those who are pumping the Murray without discernment despite the drought.
Cotton farms, rice farms, more production, you know, like, and Australia doesn't have the rainfall, doesn't have the flow to do that, to have really intensive agricultural farming that requires a lot of water. The landscape can't cope with it, you know. We've, in South Australia alone, we've cleared 92% of our native vegetation, 92% for farming. And now we have a drought for 5 years and lots of wind, and then you see all the topsoil. It goes interstate to Sydney or to Melbourne, or, you know, and people complain about the dust. Is that, you know, 60 or 70 years of poor agricultural practices are starting to come home and roost, you know, like we're really starting to see the impacts of those poor decisions made 60 or 70 years ago.
At the end of September, a gigantic orange dust storm hit Sydney. Powerful winds coming from inside the country transported tons of earth over hundreds of kilometers. No one had seen anything like it in 70 years. It took 48 hours for Sydney to get back to business as usual. Things could have been worse. Another big Australian city is facing a far more serious threat. This is Adelaide, with 1,200,000 people. It's the capital of southern Australia, as well as the country's most arid state. And Adelaide pumps most of its fresh water from the Murray River. The city also has 7 freshwater reservoirs in the surrounding mountains that are filled to the brim. However, John Ringham, the director of the waterworks, says appearances can be deceiving.
What you have behind you is a dam that holds water that would supply Adelaide for about 9 months. So there's not reality plenty of water. There's probably just enough for the coming year. We like to think that in an average year, we get about 40% of our water from the river and 60% of our water from our reservoirs. In the last 3 years, we've been getting about 95% of our supply from the river and 5% from the reservoirs. So it's been a turnaround.
An impasse rendered all the greater by the fact that the drought is now altering the quality of the drinking water. Something Roger Strother is well aware of. The pumping plant supplying his town in southern Adelaide has warned him. Next year, the water flowing through this pipe will not be fit for human consumption.
Impropre à la consommation.
I've lived here all my life, enjoyed the water at the lakes and the river. I've swam in it, I've drank it, bathed in it, all those sort of things. And here we are now, nearly towards the, well, best part of my life, I guess, that we're suddenly finding that the river is unsuitable for drinking. And it worries me, and I'm really concerned about it.
In the next few weeks, the inhabitants of Menengi will no longer be able to drink water from the tap. An emergency plan is ready.
This summer, they'll have water available in this shop for us to go and for all those on the pipeline. They'll come and get offer those free, a pack similar to what this will be. SA Water will offer each householder or each person a pack like this for drinking only. This is a tragedy. I don't know any other word to put it. It's a real tragedy, not only for myself, but for everybody here living in who relies on this pipeline for drinking water. It's actually, it's almost beyond description that here we are in Australia, in a country that prides itself on its wealth and good health and good environment. Here we are, we're in a country where we're going to be in what you call third world standards, and we're going to have to rely on bottled water for drinking. It's just, in some ways, it's unbelievable.
To avoid the worst, the city of Adelaide ordered the immediate construction of a desalination plant for seawater. The first drop of drinking water should come out of these enormous pipes at the end of next year. But this won't be enough. The factory will only cover half of Adelaide's water requirements. These are monstrous. One person in Adelaide consumes 345 liters of water per day, twice what a French person does, and the population just keeps growing. So the authorities have decided to encourage inhabitants to equip themselves with tanks to collect rainwater. It's even become compulsory for every new home. The tanks must have a minimum capacity of 1,000 liters. This can go up to 4,500 liters. They're available to suit all tastes and budgets. Chris Drought has taken the lead. He now drinks the water streaming down his roof after it's been collected in enormous tanks.
Get the air out. As you can see, it's very, very clean, and it's very good to drink. It's healthy. It goes through lots of filters, and I really enjoy it. No taste. Tastes just like water.
Last February, the southeast of the country was ravaged by monstrous fires. The worst Australians can remember. Hundreds of thousands of hectares of forest went up in smoke. Over 1,000 houses burned to the ground. Entire villages were wiped off the map. 227 died. A trauma for all Australians. But the meteorologists had given forewarning. The coming summer should be hotter than usual. A bleak forecast that Australia may hear repeatedly in the future. Saving water, which is becoming an ever more rare and precious commodity, is now the biggest challenge for all of South Australia. And while some are hoping the weather will shape up, scientists are calling for more courage and lucidity.
I wish I could say positively I expect it to come back. The reality is every single climate model says that Australia should expect the southern part of its country to become drier and to remain drier. With less water, you're going to have less agriculture. It also means we're going to have less environment as well, because when the system gets drier, parts of the environment must dry too. So we're going to have to get used to a changed landscape with less agriculture, less irrigated agriculture, and less wetlands. And we're going to have lots of arguments about how to choose which bits we keep and which bits we let go. We're learning that when climate change comes, you have to change water use and change the system as fast as the system changes. And the Australian experience has been horrible. It's been absolutely horrible. We've run out of water, and so we've had to change everything at lightning speed.
And what about us? What changes will we have to make? Even if the situation isn't as dramatic here in France, the first effects of climate imbalance can be felt. There are clear signs, in places like the vineyards, whatever the region of the country. From Alsace to Provence, the soil is being affected, and this for many years now. At the foot of the Dentelle de Montmirail, located a few kilometers from the city of Avignon, lies Châteauneuf-du-Pape, a town renowned for its vineyard, producing warm and powerful wines. But there's always less water, always more sun. In vineyards, the phenomenon begins to worry. Daniel Coulon measures his grape's future degree of alcohol.
Ça c'est trop mûr. Ça c'est trop mûr, ça fait 16 degrés, 17, 18. C'est pas le but qu'on recherche. 20 degrés même celui-ci.
Il y a 20 ans, on aurait trouvé ça?
Il y a 20 ans, on n'aurait pas trouvé ça, non.
With global warming, the degree of alcohol in the grapes is increasing. On average, here it's gone from 13 degrees and a half to 15 degrees in 25 years. And a strong wine is one that's harder to sell. So the grapes are picked earlier, so they don't produce too much alcohol. The harvest date keeps being pushed forward.
On a eu une alerte avec le millésime 2003 qui était particulièrement chaud et sec. Pour la première fois de notre vie, on a vendangé au mois d'août. Alors qu'on a toujours vendangé 15-20 septembre les débuts. Et là, on a commencé fin août. Cette année, on a battu tous les records. On a commencé la date des vendanges le 26 août. C'est tous les records, même 2003 est battu. Allez.
But harvesting earlier soon won't be enough. Wine producers like Daniel Coulon will soon start to replace their old vines with new grape varieties yielding less alcohol, calling into question a whole tradition. Because of the rise in temperatures, wine will no longer be made like before. The nurseryman selling the new plants is convinced this marks a change of era.
Vous avez des nouveaux vignobles qui se créent dans des coins où jamais on n'aurait pu penser qu'il y ait de la vigne.
Par exemple.
En Angleterre, en Belgique. Et de l'autre côté, vous avez des grandes zones d'appellation, des très beaux vignobles en Espagne. Et dans le sud de l'Italie, c'est également le cas dans le Portugal, qui sont obligés de repenser leur méthode de plantation, de préparation des sols, etc., pour donner toutes les chances aux jeunes plants de pousser. Il y a des vignobles entiers qui, si les méthodes de travail n'avaient pas évolué, seraient soumis à disparaître.
But it's not just the vineyards which are suffering as a consequence of climate imbalance.
En France,
an increase in temperatures of 3 to 4 degrees here in France before the end of the century could have a disastrous impact on the whole of the agricultural sector. Just for wheat crops, the rising numbers of heat waves could represent a shortfall of 300 million euros for farmers. Even now, the appearance of ever more pronounced droughts have been reported in regions previously spared. Even at the edge of the Rambouillet forest, nothing is like before, despite the fact that this sector, located 50 kilometers from Paris, usually gets a lot of rain.
Yeah. Allez.
Armand Lemétayer has been a farmer for 40 years. But he's never seen anything quite like this year.
Rien de comparable à cette année.
Les maïs devraient être au-dessus de ma tête, entre 1,80 m et 2 m d'auteur, suivant les variétés. Regardez, là, ils font difficilement 1 mètre. Dans les plus beaux, il reste. Les épis sont à 40 cm.
C'est bien qu'il y a un problème de climat, non?
Pour cette année, c'est certain qu'il y a un problème de climat. Même l'année de 76, qui était une année très très sec, on avait des maïs pas normaux, mais des maïs récoltables. Là, c'est quand même mai, juin, juillet, août, septembre, 5 bons mois, sans avoir une goutte d'eau. Regardez les pis, ils devraient être dans ce sens-là, mais là, ils sont tous écrasés, tous retournés. Il n'y a plus de sève depuis X temps. C'est la sécheresse qui les a brûlés. Regardez, regardez la longueur des épis de maïs. Hein? Ça devrait faire 25 à 28 cm suivant les variétés.
Et là, ça fait combien?
Ça fait 6 cm maximum. Et pas de grosseur. Le maïs, il est tout petit. Hein? C'est une vraie catastrophe pour nous.
Cette année,
this year, Armand Lemétayer's corn harvest will be a quarter of its usual size. This crop guzzles a lot of water. And because of the drought, there are losses of 35,000 euros, driving Lemétayer to despair.
Qu'est-ce qu'il veut nous dire l'avenir? On n'en sait rien. Moi, je sais pas. Je suis pas Dieu. Je sais pas l'année prochaine comment que ça va se passer. Mais si on refait une seconde année comme ça, on mettra la clé sous la porte. C'est certain.
Cet agriculteur.
This farmer has experienced it firsthand. France is already affected by global warming, like all the rest of the planet. We're all going to have to change our behavior. We must act before it's too late. The more we wait, the higher the cost to adapt ourselves. For us, just like the rest of mankind. There was so much anticipation in the run-up to the Copenhagen summit. Listen. Listen closely to this Peruvian farmer, and you'll understand why.
Señores, que ustedes, estoy seguro, que van a llevar una reunión precisamente para tocar estos temas del cambio climático. Queremos que nos entiendan, nos escuchen. Quizás no han tenido la oportunidad de ver personalmente o estar físicamente en estos lares. Nosotros como seres humanos, como peruanos, como comunicianos sufrimos. Y ustedes desde ahí, donde ustedes puedan hacer muchas cosas por el mundo, por favor, a lo mejor como hombre del campo, no les voy a tener que decir muchas cosas por hacer, pero ustedes saben qué hacer. Tomen esa decisión pensando en esa humanidad, en ese grupo humano que espera de ustedes. Nosotros también desde acá nos comprometemos. Estamos haciendo las conservaciones del suelo. Estamos tratando de plantar algunos árboles lo que podemos, a nuestra capacidad. Pero ustedes desde allá, la unión hace la fuerza. Ustedes pueden juntarse, hacer que esto camine y realmente funcione esta conservación y mejorar este cambio climático. Ustedes pueden hacerlo. Nosotros esperamos vuestro apoyo.